Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very good evening, Tuesday the 7th of January 2025. My name is Raja MIAH. This is one of those reticent 9 transmissions. I normally put one out a week, and the amount of research that goes into it is another 3 days worth of work usually. So this is the third one, consecutive one this week. I'm feeling all right, actually, if I'm honest with you. I was going to say I'm tired, but I'm not. I'm feeling all right. I went out this afternoon. Those of you who know me well, and those of you who don't will get to know me well. Always good for sniffing out the opportunity of visiting a friend of mine who's maybe has a restaurant or a takeaway or a cafe, and having a look behind the counter and seeing if there's anything nice to eat. So off I went to Royton. It was snowing in Royton, by the way, when I got there, and walked in, and a cup of tea arrived. Some biscuits arrived, and I'd not even asked. This big bowl of biryani arrived. Forget the samosas, it's biryani for the big boys. So I've been fed. So I'm in a very good mood as things go, personally. And reflecting, you've got to find for what we've been through collectively. You've got to find the small things like you to smile and laugh about. For those of you who are new to me, if my internet connection goes, do please just stay. It's not the best of connections where I live. I do pay the most I can pay for the best connection, but it always seems to mess me around every now and then. So those of you who've been here for a while understand that, and will just hang around and chat amongst yourselves, and I'll get it going again. I spent, I think, 2 hours just earlier speaking on the Richie Allen. So now Richie is a radio guy, lives Manchester, Salford way actually, who got in touch with me 5 years ago, and he said back in the 2019, early 2020, and he had me on his show. He's the first person to actually have me on an external platform, and he's got all the evidence I sent him from the time, and we spoke for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I don't know if any of you saw it, but the upshot of it was what I released 5 years ago. Actually, it's 6, but 5 years for him for when he saw it. What I've been talking about since he first came across me, and he's still got the original podcast. He's still got the original on his YouTube channel. Go and find it, Richie Allen, and you will see the reason why I am respected by those who support me is that I have been nothing but consistent throughout all of this. There's no bandwagons for me to jump on. There's no political allegiances, if I'm honest with any of you. I have friends. I am old of the Labour Party. They threw me out, remember? I have friends in the Liberal Democrat Party. I have friends in the Conservatives, and my supporters include many Reform members. So my agenda, my purpose is to try and deliver justice for my town's children. And if as a consequence on that journey, which is where we seem to be, that I can have a positive impact on children elsewhere in the country, and indeed across the country, then of course I am duty bound to deliver on that. So I have no issue with that. Some questions. I'll just look at the questions before I start. I've got a broadcasters, as I usually have. Yes, Accrington overstanding. I've been to Accrington, it's not that far. Yeah, agreed. Same issues. I have had, I think Louise here, who's here, supports me, spoke to someone from, I'm not sure, where was it, the Telegraph, Louise? Louise will comment, I'm sure, who wants to speak to me. So Louise was passing on the details. And I have had someone who sent me an email from the Mail, which I find to be interesting. The email from the Mail came via a contact of mine, and it's comedy. I'd completely forgot about it, and I'll share it with you. For a part of my life, I led the program for an organization called the Young Foundation. It was a leadership program, and we trained young people from backgrounds that traditionally don't enter parliament and enter politics, and we trained a generation of young people and put them through leadership programs. We designed, delivered leadership programs, worked across the country, and it seems there's a whole host of them now in policy roles in the government. So obviously it's difficult to portray me as a madman when one of the reasons why you're in that role in where you are is because I trained you many years ago. So as a consequence of some conversations that took place, someone from the Mails contacted me, and I will get in touch with them tomorrow. I think, Owen, is my intention. I've just not had the time, mate, if I'm honest with you. I know I took a couple of hours out to have some food this afternoon, but apart from that, no, I've just not had the time. No, UK column, I think someone sent me something. They made reference to me, and they've shared a video of mine or something, but they haven't. They've got a slightly different take to me on it, but I have no issue with that. So if they were to contact me, I would be more than happy to speak to them, but I've not seen anything, and if I have missed it, I will go and look at it. I try and be well, send him my way. Maybe he'd like to buy me a samosa and get me a season to Accrington Stanley. I'm a Liverpool fan. Aren't we playing them in the FA Cup this weekend? I'm sure we're playing them in the FA Cup this weekend. Not that I'm going, but we are playing them in the FA Cup this weekend. Okay. So Charlie Peters was in town again today. He hasn't spoken to me. He won't speak to me. It's absolutely fine. It's no issue from my point of view. And he interviewed Sophie again. And her and I don't get on. And she calls me all sorts of names online, which is fine. There's a whole host of team of survivors who struggle with me because I am frank, forthright, and often abrupt. And it's a character trait of mine. I don't suffer foolishness very well at all. And what I did at the beginning of this journey, or near the beginning of this journey, was her husband got in touch with me. He's passed now, I'm afraid. Poor lad committed suicide, couldn't cope with this, I think. Stephen couldn't cope with this, committed suicide. He was my friend. And I worked with him to get his wife's case back onto what became Andy Burnham's Assurance Review, because it had stalled and gone. The newspapers had come and gone, hadn't they? Let's be honest, Sam. The newspapers had come and gone, and you were no longer of use. And you'd not got justice because you'd gone on that bandwagon of me, this happened, and I'm not criticising at all on that. And what I promised her husband was I would work with him to make sure that we would use this to deliver justice. And telling a story of what happened to you is just one element of that. And that's where I think many of the survivors across the country are so frustrated, because the newspapers, the media companies come in, tell their story, and off they go to the next story. I'm not that man. a campaign that I'm committing to seeing to the end, and I'm very clear on what the end is. The end is the testimony of all of these survivors, because testimony, not newspaper headlines, testimony in official government reports is a vital step towards those who can somehow rebuild their lives. I've seen it in areas of conflict, in genocide, in all of it. I've seen it. And I've seen the power of testimony, of telling your story to someone in a position to do something about it and hold people responsible. So I promised I'd do that, and I'd promised I'd use every bit of skill I had to get us to a point where we would go to the government and force them to vote on a public inquiry. Tomorrow, I deliver on that promise to a man who's now dead. And I know there are so many people who are so determined to wipe me out of this whatever story that they want to tell. And that's completely fine. I have no interest. I've made my name. I made it a long time ago. So I'm not interested. And what I'm committed to, and what this government is committed to avoiding at all costs, is holding to account those politicians who are responsible for covering this up. There are a number of elements in this. Let me bring this up so I can do it this way. So you see it, those of you who are new to me, I have a little drawing thing here that I pretend I know how to use. That's too wide. First of all, there is the attitudes and belief system in the perpetrator community. A public inquiry, a genuine public inquiry, should be looking at the reasons why men who come from these communities, because now the Home Secretary is using the term Pakistani heritage grooming gangs, well, why men from these communities believe they can do what they can. So there's something about looking at the perpetrator community so we can come up with a strategy to deal with it in that community. There's something at looking at the actual rapists, the men, the gang rapists, members. And of course, for me, there are three strands we go after. And I shared this with you before. The groomers, the gang members, and of course, the last one is the customers. Unless we believe that men who are paying £50 a time, that's the figure I've been told, £50 a time, to rape children are not culpable. And the way this goes is a triangle. So these are fewer, and those are in the tens of thousands. And we need to look, a public inquiry would need to look at all of those elements rather than just focusing here. It's easy, isn't it? The next one is the frontline staff who failed. And the frontline staff who failed consistently have said it was about the fear of being racist. The fear of being racist, and also attitudes towards working class girls. And those working class girls, the attitudes they had, in my opinion, you'd find complete parallels with attitudes in the perpetrator community. And then, of course, Louise, you're ahead of me. is those who are involved in the actual cover-up. Those involved in the actual cover-up were the police, the politicians, the policy officers in the council, so the likes of Carl Marsden, the communications guy from Oldham Council who celebrated keeping this story out. Ooh, what have I done? I've broken something. No, there you go. And then the press, the newspapers, the metropolitan elite media. And a public inquiry would look at all four strands. What we're seeing, and it's a tactic of government, and has been a tactic of the government for a long time, instead of looking at all four of those strands, the media, the mainstream media, the legacy media, the establishment media, whatever term you want to use, is focused on victims. Oh, isn't it horrible what happened here? Or isn't it horrible what happened there? And the second one that they're concerned on is fallout, race relations, which is where Starmer and his lot get the far-right bandwagon from. So really, and the NGOs, you're right. In terms of the cover-up, of course. So, they want to avoid that and focus, really, on this. And that means so they can cover up and continue to cover up what's gone on. What I do really annoys them, because very simply, I've just described to you what a public inquiry, the four strands that a public inquiry should look at. Next, what we have is why they are trying to avoid a public inquiry. And one of the reasons why they're starting to mobilize more and more is that it's time for action. An inquiry will take too long. We've already had inquiries, and they've wheeled out a woman called Professor Alexis J. Now, I have no issue with Alexis J. Historically, she did good work. The ICSA report, I didn't really enjoy the recommendations. I thought it was too cumbersome. The past government didn't implement any of it. And now this government is saying, we'll implement these as long as we don't have to look at the grooming gangs. And she's happy for that because it gets her work implemented. You know how we talked about a price? Working class girls' lives are, it's a commodity that can be traded. Well, I think that's what's taking place here. Okay, so let me show you this. The chair of the Child Sex Abuse Inquiry denounces Musk over grooming gangs. So this is the establishment mobilising itself, of which Professor Alexis J is. She did good work in Rotherham. She did good work with the ICSA report, even though I'm not happy with it, but it's good work. But now what we have been focusing on, of those four strands, is the cover-up. And we've cornered ministers at the highest level of government in this country. We've cornered Jim McMahon, minister in government. We've cornered Debbie Abrams, what is your Home Affairs Select Committee? We've cornered Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester Mayor, King of the North, the Metropolitan Elite's darling. And we've cornered the working class hero that is Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister. We've exposed Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, after she hired the former leader of Oldham Council, who we voted out for her role in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of the town's children. Just on its own, think that through. We get a leader of Oldham Council who stands in a council chamber and says he can't say it destroyed lives. An outraged town votes her out. And because of her loyalty to the Labour Party, I would imagine that's the reason, rather than any skills she's got in campaign management. If a bunch of working class... If half a dozen of us, can coordinate a campaign against the entire machinery of the Labour Party and remove Amanda Chariton from her council seat, I'd like to say she doesn't really have any competencies in campaign management. I think it's very clear what was taking place. The Labour Party rewarded her for a role in helping prevent a public inquiry. Or am I being unfair? So, Alexis J has said she backs Starmer and said there is no need for a national inquiry because her report covers it. And we should get on with action. I think it was David is here, David Nestor, who asked me about the J report. David. I always bring the samosas. So this is her, yeah. Keir Starmer's received a boost in his grooming gang row with Elon Musk after the head of a national child sex inquiry backed the Prime Minister. There is no need for a new national investigation. In a pointed intervention, the chair of the independent inquiry into child sex abuse, that's what we mean by ICSA, said those whipping up the current furore do not have the interests of victims at heart. Well, I've been doing this for 6 years. So I'd like to think that she cannot use that allegation against me. Measures already recommended to tackle the problem. La-di-da-di-da. Ooh, Raja, what's this? Telford Council to commission child sex inquiry. Remember the Telford report? 10th of April 2018. Do you know why the Telford report was commissioned? By Telford Council themselves, even though they knew that the judge-led inquiry did not have the powers of a public inquiry. Here we've got Professor Alex J saying there's no need. Telford Council commissioned the sex abuse inquiry, and this is the BBC. This isn't some far-right media platform. At the weekend, council leader Sean Davies said he had come to the conclusion a council inquiry is better than none. So the government turned it down, request for a public inquiry, and it was meant to be included in the ICSA report as a case study, as one of the places that's investigated. However, a council inquiry would only go ahead if the national inquiry into CSE, the J inquiry, which is the ICSA report, decided not to investigate Telford. There you have it on the BBC's own webpage. So this local Telford inquiry went ahead. They appointed a judge. He found a whole host of horrific outcomes. But the point I want to make to you is Alexis J says we've already got the findings, but she's not done the work in the communities where the Pakistani grooming gangs operated. So how can you move with findings from a report that did not investigate these issues? And where they made reference to them, their own panel members have come out and said, we didn't do this. This is one of the reasons they despise me. I go and find the evidence and I show it to you and I ask the obvious questions, and that's how we've mobilized and took council leaders out in this town, and I would imagine that's how moving forward we will mobilize and take out MPs who tomorrow vote to what? Essentially protect Pakistani rape gangs. Or am I being unfair in the way I'm describing this? So that is why Professor Alexis J, establishment figure, and her statement does not hold any weight whatsoever. How can the recommendations of a report that did not investigate these issues or in these towns and cities where the Pakistani rape gangs operated, how can that be? Surely you've got to go to the places where it happened. Oh, wow. Thank you. Secondly, they're presenting it as though it's a binary choice. They're doing this on purpose. They're manipulating every one of you. If Alexis J and Starmer want to implement the recommendations of the ICSA report, which is to do a wider range of issues to do with child sex exploitation and failing in protecting children, surely the might of the government can go ahead and implement those recommendations whilst also conducting a public inquiry. Are you telling me His Majesty's government can't do two things at once? Are you really telling me that His Majesty's government cannot do two things at once? They are playing us and they are trying to manipulate us. And thank you. The J report mentioned Rochdale once, and that was in relation to Cyril Smith. For those of you who are from America and other places like that, Cyril Smith was the MP for Rochdale. He was a prolific child sex offender. It was well known. He should have been arrested and prosecuted, and MI5 protected him. That is not Raja MIAH conspiracy theorists sharing that with you. That is a matter of public record. I think it was the BBC in the end had to do a documentary on it. Cyril Smith was protected in the way Jimmy Savile was protected by the BBC. So there you have it. For those of you who say the J report should move forward with its recommendations, let it. But be very clear. The J report does not include the Pakistani rape gangs. And the J report has not worked in the towns and cities. I think it was GB News that said 50. My information is it's more, but let's go with 50. And in a small country such as ours, 50 is considerable. And you avoided investigating all 50 of those? In your, 7-year report or something? No. So, that's what I wanted to clear up first. Secondly, Elon Musk put out a statement a tweet. Are there tweets anymore? Are there posts, X's? I don't know what they are. He put something up on X accusing Jess Phillips of rape genocide, protect her or something. Yeah, let me find the Guardian story to it. Elon Musk knows absolutely nothing about women and girls' safety, says Jess Phillips. Safeguarding Minister says billionaire has increased the risk of harm by calling her a rape genocide apologist on X. Speaking for the first time since Musk's flurry of abuse to his 210 million followers on X, Phillips, the safeguarding minister, said the comments had made her more worried about her safety. Jess Phillips should know about what her Labour Party colleagues did to my safety. But I want to tell you a story. Rape genocide. That is a technical term that essentially means instead of just killing the entire population, genocide, wiping them out, what you do is you kill the men and you impregnate all the women so that the children they have are no longer of the race. They're of the race that conquered them. That is what rape genocide is. Elon Musk used that term towards Jess Phillips following Jess Phillips' refusal to support a public inquiry into the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of working-class white girls in Oldham by predominantly Pakistani rape gangs. Remember Shabir Ahmed, ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, lived in Oldham, Pakistani bloke, so on and so on. Yeah. Rape genocide. Rape genocide is a strategy used by Pakistan. In the East Pakistan, West Pakistan civil war, if you want to call it a civil war, genocide is what the Bangladeshis call it. 3 million people were killed in something like a 9-month period. And something like 500,000 women were raped as young as 9. Matter of public record. Rape genocide. So the notion of rape genocide is something that is familiar within the Pakistani identity. I'm not saying this is a matter of fact. I need to say this again because what tends to happen is when I speak on these issues in the way I do, the police come and raid my house and arrest me as a racist. So I'll quantify this with this article. This article is from the far-right newspaper, The Guardian. Ooh, look, the article is more than 1 year old. Does that make it less relevant? Or The Guardian knows something I don't know? We lay like corpses. Then the raping began. 52 years on, Bangladesh's rape camp survivors speak out. So they herded these children, these young women, into these rape camps, like what the Japanese did in the Second World War. In 1971, the Pakistan Army began a brutal crackdown against Bengalis in which hundreds of thousands of women were detained and repeatedly brutalized. Only now are their stories being told. Warning, graphic information in this report may upset some readers. I'm going to read some of this because I think it's important because Elon Musk is an intelligent man. And to think otherwise makes anyone else, in my opinion, absolutely thick as pig shit. So when you use the term rape genocide apologist, I'm sure he is familiar with his history to a far greater degree than I am. It was the summer of 1971 and the distant murmurs of a war had begun months earlier, had made their way to Rajeshi in Bangladesh across the north bank of the Padam River to Nur Jahan's door. The 14-year-old was playing in the courtyard with her little sister when a loud military truck came to a halt outside the family's farmhouse. Armed soldiers threw the two girls into the back of the truck, where they discovered several women sitting back to back with their hands tied. They told us to look down and to remain silent, recalls Jahan, now 65. The truck continued through the small town, making several stops, each time loading more women and girls into the back as if they were cattle. All the women were sobbing silently, Jahan describes, too afraid to make a sound. We had no idea where they're taking us. I watched from the corner of my eye as the marigold fields surrounding our home disappeared from sight. A 14-year-old child and her sister, says Jahan. I remember clutching my sister's hand tightly and being terrified the entire time. We had all heard about the Butcher of Bengal and his men. The Butcher of Bengal was the nickname given to the Pakistan's military commander, General Tika Khan, notorious for overseeing Operation Searchlight, a murderous crackdown on Bengali separatists in what was then East Pakistan, which led to a genocidal crusade during the liberation war that followed. But Jahan was about to become a victim of another brutal attack of the Pakistani army. Alongside the killings, soldiers carried out a violent campaign of mass rape against Bengali women and girls in what many historians believe amounted to a direct policy under Khan's command to impregnate as many women as possible with blood from the West. When the truck finally came to a stop, the girls found themselves in military barracks. The next few months were a blur for Jahan, who regularly passed out during her confinement. We lay like corpses side by side. There were 20, maybe 30 of us confined to one room, she recalls tearfully. The only time we saw daylight was when the door creaked open and the soldiers marched in. Then the raping would begin. During the conflict that led to the birth of Bangladesh, a military-style rape camp, such as the ones in which Jahan was held, were set up across the country. Official estimates put the number of Bengali women raped at between 200,000 and 400,000. Remember, this was a 9-month war. 200,000 and 400,000. For even these numbers are considered conservative by some. Though ethnic rape was feature of partition early on, what Bengali women experienced was one of the first recorded examples of rape being used, consciously applied weapon of war in the 20th century. But despite its shocking scale, little remains known about it outside the region. I'm going to stop there. There's a story, it's on The Guardian. The Guardian, you should go and read it. What I am articulating to you, is that rape genocide is a feature of the history of Pakistan. It is a tactic used by tens of thousands of Pakistani men, who then went back and told their cousins, their uncles, their sons what they did whilst they were out in East Pakistan. Now, not for one moment am I saying every Pakistani supported this. They did not. But it is a cultural tactic that they used. And do you know how they used it? Do you know how? Now I want to show this picture. I want you to see this photograph. In August 1971, Razia Begum had gone looking for her husband, Abu Sakar, who had been missing for several days. She wandered anxiously through the abandoned streets. In Dhaka, where Sakar was a fruit seller, but he was nowhere to be found. Begum turned the corner when she found herself face to face with a group of soldiers. She tried to run, but was struck on the head with a rifle, a scar she still bears. Begum was dragged back to a nearby forest, where she was raped repeatedly over a period of weeks. The soldiers were stationed close by and returned at different times of the day. They tied me to a tree and took turns raping me during the breaks. After they were done with her, the soldiers threw Begum into a shallow ditch. Bangladesh has already succeeded in getting genocide recognition from the Institute for Genocide Prevention and Genocide Watch, and US Congress recently introduced a historic resolution recognizing that genocide occurred in 1971. So the US Congress recognized genocide took place. The tactic used by the Pakistani regime was promoted by Islamic clerics. They believed that the ethnic race of Bengalis in the East were inferior to them, and that their religion had been polluted by their close association with the Hindus. They were the master race, they were purer blood, and the culture of the Bangladeshis, the Bengalis, was inferior. They deserved it. Any of this sounding familiar? Any of the narrative used to commit genocide, rape, as confirmed here, not me, Greater Manchester Police has confirmed officially. Do you see the same pattern being used in terms of legitimizing the mass gang rape, the industrial scale gang rape of working class white girls across the United Kingdom by Pakistani heritage rape gangs? I'm being careful with my words to avoid arrest. Those are the words of the Home Secretary. Pakistani heritage rape gangs. So when Elon Musk used the term rape genocide apologist, the rape genocide wasn't just a reference to what was taking place, it was the historical connection to how Pakistan had already committed rape genocide. Do you see? Now I am what am I? I'm a middle of a road sort of bloke. If I know this, why have some of the greatest mind in the United Kingdom government not stopped to consider why he might have used those terms instead of just think it's an attack on Jess Phillips? Because if you take my interpretation, and I've gone through it, I think systematically, does not make her a rape genocide apologist? Because the same tactic that was used by the same demographic against a different community 30 years ago, remember 1971, 72, the rape gangs that we know of operated when? in the 80s? I would argue it was the same men. That first generation who were involved in the 80s, I would argue it was the same men. So they're outraged at something a very intelligent man has said, and they've missed the meaning. Yes, please, thank you. I'm not good at any of this, by the way. This isn't my world, this technological stuff. I've taught myself what I can, and I do the best I can. So please do press like. I'm sure it does something for the algorithm. I was staggered yesterday when I turned off. I think something like 3,000 people had viewed what I'd put out yesterday. So, 2 things we've done so far. We've destroyed the J report. We've demonstrated the 4 elements as to what a public inquiry would do, rather than what the government are trying to do, which is just focus on the victims and shift the course of any investigation elsewhere. And we've now moved on to the Elon Musk's use of rape genocide and explained it to all of you, so you can counter some of the narrative that's coming out of the government. Okay. Next, I need to put my headphones on. Give me 1 second. Yes, she did, didn't she? Thank you, Tony. We were at that council meeting, and a woman who just came into the meeting marched up to the mic and shared her harrowing testimony of how she was repeatedly raped and passed around whilst in care, and it goes back to 1981. And most of you, I don't think, I had to educate myself. Most people were not educated about the East Pakistan, West Pakistan war, the genocide, and the use of rape genocide. The Times has published this as the opinion piece. The public is rightly furious at the silence around grooming gangs. Only a new national inquiry can fully uncover the truth about this scandal. They rip apart Alexis J's claim that we don't need one. Just over 2 years ago, Professor Alexis J concluded England and Wales was suffering from an epidemic of child sexual abuse. Her thorough investigation ran for 7 years, and heard from thousands of victims describing horrific levels of abuse over many decades. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, ICSA, revealed a deep rot in society, not only in the depraved behaviour of individuals, but how institutions protected themselves at great cost to the victims. The inquiry, and I'm jumping to the next section to see it's relevant. The inquiry may not be the final word. There have been numerous other investigations into child sex abuse with an increased focus on grooming gangs that have seen men predominantly of Pakistani heritage. Thank God. The Times is now saying this. Modern day Times is now saying this. Targeting white women and girls. The northern town of Rotherham has seen multiple investigations into such wicked gangs. Oldham Council recently asked for an inquiry into historical abuse in the town, which was rejected by Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, who argued that a local-led effort would have more legitimacy. In turn, she has been the target of unacceptable unlicensed abuse fueled by Mr. Musk. I don't Mr. Musk fueled the abuse. I think Mr. Musk shared his opinion. Because if you think you're fueling abuse by sharing your opinion or stating facts, then the newspaper such as The Times is responsible for fueling abuse. As a footnote, for those of you who are new to me, I'm smiling at this because the Sunday Times, which is one of the most prestigious publications in the United Kingdom, I think, print publications, the Sunday Times ran a story on me. A smear piece, what do you call them? A hit piece on me. There was a journalist called Hannah Al-Ottman who worked for the Times, contacted with a whole host of allegations clearly fed by her Labour Party masters. Hannah Al-Ottman, it emerged, was previously a Labour Party press officer. I, being the man I am, was fed up with the photograph that they were using of me in the various hit pieces that had come beforehand. So I sent her a more up-to-date photograph with, here's a nice new picture of me, please use that. Which to her credit she did, while she abused me in the Sunday Times. The Sunday Times are now agreeing with me. The Times are now agreeing with me. A newspaper, however, can only go so far. Grooming gangs were only one element of Professor Jay's inquiry. Rotherham garners a sole mention, one sole mention in a 468-page report, and the gangs in Telford are not referenced. Well, we know the gangs in Telford are not referenced because Telford was excluded, which is why Telford went and launched its own investigation. A new national inquiry is needed to explore where and how these gangs operated. It must not skirt around sensitive subjects, including ethnicity. It should not replicate mistakes of the past. Investigations into Grenfell disaster and the post office scandal have gone on for too many years, racking up enormous bills. If the victims of grooming gangs are to receive the justice that is long overdue, it requires a swift, independent and public process aimed at exposing in full detail one of the deepest ills of our age. These people claimed I was a far-right activist. These people are now agreeing with me and agreeing with you. So there you go. Are we still okay? Are we all doing? Let me play a video for you.
Lewis Quigg. Lewis, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. You just had to listen to that terrible story of just one victim in Oldham and the treatment she had when she went to the police after the abuse she experienced. A particularly tragic story, but as Charlie says, there are many such stories, unfortunately. Now, you have tried to bring up this issue many times at the council. Can you bring us up to date on where they are in Oldham on all of this? Because we know Jess Phillips turned down a national inquiry.
Thank you, Emily, for giving the opportunity to speak, and Tom. At the moment, we're now waiting for the council to start with the survivors, what is meant to be a local inquiry. But this is where it gets very complicated. The council do not give out information sufficiently or adequately to anyone who's not a member of the administration. So effectively, opposition councillors such as myself, Liberal Democrats, Independents, are shut out from this process. And that means that there is an information gap between those who should be in a position of responsibility and what the public expect from the council. We've had to vote 6 times to get a public inquiry, a local inquiry, or even a review into this. And at each turn, the Labour Council blocked that at every stage. The local MPs who One's now a minister and one is now the chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee, have been silent on this issue. Where have they been? They can criticise my party for perhaps a lack of action over 14 years, but where were they in Parliament for all that time, voicing concerns of survivors to say, we do need this inquiry in Oldham, or we need a national inquiry to try and uncover the facts that have basically been covered up. You know, Sam's story, I mean, the more you hear of it, the worse it gets, because I was at the council meeting in 2022 when the Greater Manchester Assurance Review for Oldham was launched, an assurance review that assured nobody, by the way, because it literally scratched the surface and only found a dozen people, a dozen. And Sam had to fight to be included into that review. Mm. And we had, and it was such a powerful meeting that survivor, I remember it clearly as the day it was said, a survivor came to the mic at the council meeting and said, I was in care in Oldham Council in the 1980s and I was trafficked and groomed. That's how far back it goes.
It is just shocking hearing those stories.
That assurance review covered 2011 to 2014 with the terms of reference set by Oldham Council. Oldham Council should hold its head in shame. It is a council in chaos. It is a council in chaos.
Sorry, Lewis, the review is only covering 3 years of the last 30 years. I mean, the Grooming Gangs Task Force established, 2 years ago, found they arrested 550 people in their first few months of operation. I mean, this is something that's still going on now. Why do you think the Oldham Council period of review is just 3 years from 2011 to 2014?
It's so narrow because essentially what happened is that allegations started to emerge online through campaigners such as Warren Bates, who was a former Oldham councillor, through Raja MIAH MBE, who was an online campaigner and still campaigns on this issue, who basically brought it to the public attention. My group at the time, before I was a councillor, wrote a letter to the chief executive and the council leader at the time to say we need to investigate these allegations that are being made. That council leader, who's now currently councillor in Bolton, said these allegations online are barefaced lies. So he lost his seat because of this, I hasten to add, in 2021. We then had another council leader, Amanda Chatterton, who said that it didn't destroy their lives. It didn't destroy their lives. The people she spoke to, it didn't destroy their lives. And she lost her seat. And it's interesting to note that that same ex-council leader is now sat in the staff of Yvette Cooper's office. You'd think she'd give some salient advice to say that if the people of Oldham are as angry as they are, where they have removed 3 council leaders, that the Labour Party, now they are in government, would do something about it, pull up the bootstraps and right a wrong that has clearly been done to white working class girls in this country.
And Lewis, this isn't historic though, is it? Lewis, I've heard you say before that you believe this type of crime, grooming gangs, rape gangs, whatever you want to call it, is still going on in Oldham, still happening.
Yeah, I mean, the current leader of the council has said in the past it's still going on. Obviously, I can't go into any specifics, but the rumour mill that goes around, people hear this, that people are now being plied with vapes, and it just doesn't seem to have ended, because the issue you have is that these people feel immune from what's going on because we haven't looked at the past. We haven't uncovered what's gone before. It's okay them saying, oh, we now got all these measures in place. That's all well and good. But all these measures that are in place now don't uncover the failings of the past. And there could be hundreds, if not thousands of children just in Oldham, Tameside and Rochdale who have yet to be uncovered for the crimes that have been committed against them. And the best we can get from the government is essentially, you do your own local inquiry. We're not having any more national inquiries. That's it. I'm sorry, but the lessons from Oldham are, you can keep rejecting us. You can keep rejecting the survivors and you can keep voting it down. We had council meetings where Labour Party councillors sat there and voted against it, council meeting after council meeting, with the screams, literal screams of survivors shouting, why? And if the Labour Party nationally wish to continue down that road, then woe betide, because the tide of public opinion will turn against them faster than it ever did in Oldham.
Lewis, it's such a powerful story you put forward there. Such a a powerful moment when three council leaders, one by one, lose their seats over this issue. Something clearly is brewing there. But we should mention, of course, you mentioned one of those now works for the Home Secretary, of course, not here to defend themselves. They would say they're implementing the recommendations of the ICSA report announced in Parliament yesterday. But I think many people listening would also think that, hang on, an inquiry here, why is that not being pushed for? Lewis Quigg, thanks so much for joining us and talking through the extraordinary events that have
Sorry. How? No sound. So what I was doing, I was eating a chocolate. And because I was eating a chocolate, I was... Turn the mic on mute. I'll do it again. I didn't want you to hear me, yes. So that's my friend Lewis Quigg. He's the Conservative councillor for Royton South. He's the Conservative councillor for Royton South. Lewis has been reported as a far-right racist and all sorts by Labour Party politicians. And he once used the term mango chutney in a council meeting, along with marmalade and jam. So, as in a chutney, yeah? He once used the term mango chutney. Arud Shah, the leader of Oldham Council, reported it as racist. Use of the term mango chutney was racist. This is how desperate they've been to try and shut him down. He once attended an event with us after I think we helped get him elected, or a few of us elected. Many of you came. It was a meal. Photograph from that meal was taken by a man called Neil Wilby, a malicious blogger with direct affiliations at the time with Jim McMahon and Arud Shah, and distributed. Pakistani gangsters parked outside Lewis Quigg's house, so he knew they knew where he lived. The leader of Oldham Council, Arud Shah, went to venues where Lewis Quigg was meeting with whistleblowers or survivors and tried to obtain CCTV footage of who he was meeting with. I'm not making any of this up. This is what he means by a town in chaos. This is what he means by a gangster. This is what I mean by a gangster town. Extremely brave of him to have gone on national news and done this. Sometimes we think this is easy. It's not easy, because you're putting yourself in the firing line. The machinery of the Labour Party in a town like mine has no red lines. And I have no doubt that whatever target Lewis was before, he will be an even bigger target now. The council, so we're clear. Sorry, Anya, I'm hoping you're all behind and the sound is now working. Yeah. The council, the restaurant we met in was called the Blue Tiffin. Very lovely restaurant. My friend Jack and his brother owned it. It was a family business and we all grew up together. We all grew up together in a very poor community, so that's why there is that bond between all of us. And me being me, of course I use it as my drop-in. I was passing. Is there anything being cooked nice in the back? And we had a meeting there. And then the business got raided. Nothing wrong with it. It's one of the best restaurants in town, has been for a long time. The newspaper, the council-funded newspaper, jumped on it, downgraded its rating to 1, tried to make it out as though it was a really poor kitchen. It wasn't. I've been eating there forever. I take my daughter there. I took my mum when she was alive there for a meal. It's one of the best restaurants in town. It was done to punish them. I went in, embarrassed, to speak to my friend Jack. He's not there anymore. They've sold it and moved on. I think they've had enough. They've run it for a long time. You know what he said to me? I'm sorry, I'm going to swear because I'm going to use his words. And if you know Jack, you know he's like this. Raja, they can get fucked. So this is what these gangsters do. This gangster-run council does. It mobilises its machinery to attack people. They were basically mobilising its machinery to stop us meeting and sharing a meal together. So if you're passing there, it's under new management, but it doesn't matter. The lads who run it now are a different set of friends of mine. Do pop in and do have a meal, and do please say I sent you. Yeah, you'll probably get a samosa as an extra. Okay, so that's Lewis Quigg. He talked about the Andy Burnham review. Remember? McMahon yesterday, Angela Rayner, Debbie Abrams, parliamentary letter-headed paper about one of the most thorough reviews ever. He just confirmed that review covered a period of 2 years, just over 2 years, with terms of reference set by the council. Do you see how the cover-up and the cover-up and the cover-up happens? Layer upon layer upon layer. And he also talks about grooming gangs still going on because these men think they are immune from what's going on. Let me reword or rephrase what I think he means from immune from what's going on. They are protected. They are politically protected. They can go out and do what they want. Now follow this through with me. If a rape gang, or grooming gang, use whatever phrase you want, believes that they are protected and they can go out and do whatever they want, then the obvious question is, why are they protected? And who is protecting them? And I'm being very clear why they are protected, because when you look at the actual case studies of men like Shabir Ahmed, it's because they are influential figures in the community who controlled how the wider community voted, and they could control how the wider community voted because instead of you and me going and voting in a Booth, when no one else could see us, in the United Kingdom, you can vote by postal votes, and these postal votes can be harvested very easily, as proven by a judge. And do you know what the Labour Party answer is? The Labour Party objected to voter ID. Forget postal votes, they objected to voter ID. They are of the opinion that you could just turn up to a polling station, say a name, and they'd give you a ballot paper where you could go and vote. You didn't even have to prove who you were. That's the Labour Party policy on checks and balances of voting. And it is the Conservatives' fault. And I'm sorry, my friends from Reform. If we are going to deal with the grooming gangs, then we've got to deal with the underlying conditions through which these men believe they are protected. And that is to get rid of postal votes. So we go back to a system that we once had in this country before Tony Blair, the Labour Party Prime Minister, changed it, where you had to meet a certain criteria to postal vote. If you're ill, if you're out of the country, if you're in the armed forces, things like that. Now, I've seen clear evidence, because I ran in the general election, remember, I've seen clear evidence of postal vote fraud, of postal vote harvesting. It's endemic. And there are certain individuals who control thousands of postal votes. Now, if they control thousands of postal votes, and the very politicians in power are reliant on them, and that includes the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, who's also the Police and Crime Commissioner, and postal voting is overrepresented in the Pakistani community, in the Bangladeshi community, in the Muslim communities, where a higher percentage of people are registered for postal votes. What does that say to you? Oh, there's no evidence of postal vote harvest. Of course there's no evidence. How are you going to find the evidence? Surely you look at the statistics and the patterns, and then if you carried it on, I'd guarantee you that there is overrepresentation of postal votes and voting for certain parties and certain candidates. I'd guarantee you that. There was an election in Hollingwood where the Pakistani sectarians ran not so long ago. And the story I got was, we've already got so many votes. And I looked and said, how have you got so many votes? So it's the postal votes. We've counted the people, because you get the registers also with who votes with what, and they marked all the postal voters. Like, well, what if they don't want to vote for you? I just got a smile. When a heroin dealer rocks up to your door and asks you, this is how it works. A heroin dealer knocks on your door and says to you, we've seen the electoral register. There's 8 of you living in this house. And the father will look at him and say, yeah. Well, you're not registered. Are you registered to vote? Yeah. Would it not be better if you were registered as a postal voter? So the dad's looking at this guy and he's thinking, I know what he wants. Here, I've brought the forms for you. Sign here and we'll get you registered for postal votes. So dad goes in, signs, gets his other kids, whatever, to sign. Mr. Heroin Dealer goes knocking on the next door, he's on his list. And there's a surge, always, of such registrations in the lead up to elections. Mr. Pakistani Heroin Dealer knocks on your door because he knows when the postal votes have arrived. In the old days, they used to cut out the middleman and just steal the postal votes from the postman. Now there's a little bit more checks, so here we go. He turns up. Can you sign your postal votes for you? Don't put an X there. I'll take them now. What's he going to do? Is he going to argue with a heroin dealer? Is he bugger going to argue with a heroin dealer? Have my family's 8 postal votes. Of course, some do it voluntarily to gain status, and some also do it and go to the wider family networks to collect them. So one person goes with 50, 60, 70, 80. And indeed, a convicted heroin dealer was front and centre of the Labour Party campaign in Oldham. So, if we took that away, then we would go one huge step towards these individuals knowing that they were not immune from what's going on in the way Lewis describes. Indeed, Karen, landlords take them from tenants exactly the same way. I know Romanian, I don't know, I've seen Romanian gangmasters offer them for a price, of course. I know of a meeting that took place not long ago where candidates from various parties sat together with these votes. Remember, they've not got a cross on them each, and bartered them between different areas. I'm standing in, I'll make a name, I'm standing in Wernerf Ward, for instance. And you're standing in St. James as well. Your family clan or your drug dealing network has managed to get 100 postal votes for my ward. I've managed to get 50 for your ward. Can we buy them off each other? I'm not making any of this up. But that gives these people power. Okay. I want to go on to Jess Phillips. I promised you I'd rip her to shreds. Can I just have a drink? I'm going to have a little break. I'm going to rip Jess Phillips to shreds. Most of you are still here. There's about, I don't know how many of you are here, but I'm looking at a graph and it's still, there's people still interested. Are you okay? Are you all okay for me to carry on? Been here for an hour and a half. If you are, I'll continue. If you're finding value, please at the very least press like or share or something or whatever it is you do. And I'll come back in a moment. I'll play the Barefaced Lies song. If you're finding value, please do consider buying me a coffee. These transmissions are 100% community funded. My work for the last 6 years is 100% community funded. The truth is, I will never work again. I am from the world that I've now ripped apart and have exposed it for what it is. The simple truth is, I will never work again in the world where I have been trained in. So please, if you find value, support me.
It's your money that I'm gonna spend, yeah.
Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again, barefaced lies. Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. You can point where it's all gonna end, yeah. You can feel it without wanting to defend, yeah. Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting old, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Hey Sean, you got a party, got that Labour party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do
agenda, and it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and cold, overflowing, postal throwing, better face. That's right, and we got an agenda, and it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and cold, overflowing, postal throwing, better face lies.
Bare-faced lies. Bare-faced lies.
Comrades, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda, and it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and cold, overflowing, postal throwing, better face lies. Is this where you wanna be? Debts and childhood poverty. Oh, somebody set us free from this corrupt kleptocracy. Oh yeah.
Bare-faced lies.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda, and it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit and cold, overflowing, postal throwing, better face. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda, and it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? 'Cause when the truth
Those barefaced lies. I paint a. I don't want you to think that we are powerless, because we are not. Once we understand the scale of the challenge, what the exact specifics are we need to deal with, and then we can mobilize our communities and go and deal with them, and that's what we've done. It's why they've tried to lock me up. The GB News guy, Lewis referred to it, we got rid of 3 council leaders in a row. Let's be clear. Those 3 council leaders in a row went because we mobilised a campaign of the kind that's never been seen in this town. It's never been seen in this country. Never mind this town. This is a Labour Party stronghold. We took out 3 council leaders in a row. And it was, like I shared with you yesterday, I think at the most there was 150 to 200 of us. None of this is difficult. It's just the noise you've got to avoid. The courage of your convictions you've got to maintain, and you go for it. You set out and you go for it. It is Vimto, mate. I don't drink coffee this late at night. It's a hot cup of Vimto. And we do have a proud history in the past. Someone asked me the other day, why don't you just move? Why should I move? This is my home. I'm going to fight for it. Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips made a name for herself as this sort of pint of beer drinking, women's rights, sort of brash woman from Birmingham. Strong and all the rest of it. The first time I properly came across Jess Phillips was to do with these schools in Birmingham that had been part of a Trojan horse thing, where there was trying to be some sort of Islamist takeover of these schools. It made the national news. Jess Phillips was one of the MPs, and I remember having to go down. I'd been asked to go down and look at what was going on. That's a story for another day, and a challenge for us for another day, I think. But it is concerning, and it should concern people, what took place with the Trojan horse stuff. And I've got no issue historically with Jess Phillips. My honest opinion of her, she's one of the more competent of the MPs in the Labour Party of this generation. She's definitely better than Angela Rayner, in my opinion. She definitely cares more for her constituency than someone like Debbie Abrahams here, who's we nicknamed Debbie Kashmir because she's more interested in what goes on in Kashmir than in the working class community she represents here. So I'm sharing this because I have no agenda against Jess Phillips. When we came into this and we started campaigning for a public inquiry, I did not know that it would be Jess Phillips that would write back. I had genuinely thought when he wrote to the government, the Home Office, it would be the Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, on a matter such as this. But it got delegated to Jess Phillips, and I think she got set up. I'm not making excuses for her. I think she got set up. I don't think she stopped to consider what was going on, the ramifications of what was going on. And so she signed this letter. And now she's stuffed. And you saw her yesterday, she's completely stuffed. And then today's establishment reaction was to try and portray her as a victim of misogyny, a woman being picked on, her life's at threat. It's a tactic. It's the exact same tactic. It's the exact same tactic that the Labour Party used to try and silence me and attack me with Arud Shah. She stood up in the council chamber, started crying, and claimed she was a victim of misogyny. And I was a misogynist for questioning her. It's just a tactic they use. The fact is, Jess Phillips is in the position she is because she signed a letter, willingly or unwillingly. She knows the answer to that, I don't. She signed a letter denying a public inquiry. So the Minister for Safeguarding Girls signed a letter denying a public inquiry into the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of working class girls. And then she claims you can have a local inquiry instead, when someone such as Jess Phillips will have known that a local inquiry does not have the powers. So she got piled on from all sides, I think. And the day before the vote, they wheel her out. Now, this is the first time I came across Jess Phillips in the newspapers. I want to bring this up so you see it. So she's not a weak woman. And this is how she would behave. Labour MP Jess Phillips will knife Corbyn in the front if he damages the party. So that was her own statement in 2020, saying she would knife Jeremy Corbyn in the front, not the back. So she's used language charged with violence. You can see. She's used language charged with violence to attack what was then the Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn. I will knife you in the front, not the back. When this advert went out of Rishi Sunak, do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. Under the Tories, 4,500 adults convicted of sexually assaulting children under 16 serve no prison time. Labour will lock up dangerous child abusers. That was an official Labour Party campaign. And Jess Phillips' position was that the campaign wasn't hard enough on Rishi Sunak. So she'll stab her own leader in the front and not in the back. And this, if it's not incitement of violence or targeted, well, what is it then? Labour MP Jess Phillips says her party's controversial attacks adverse against Rishi Sunak last week didn't go far enough. The advert accuses the PM of personally going easy on paedophiles. Of course he didn't, and was accused of dog whistle politics. But Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence Phillips, who thinks the Tories have broken the justice system, told the Political Party podcast she would have gladly defended it. What's everyone bitching and moaning about? Her own words. What's everyone bitching and moaning about? She said, it's not hard enough for me. These are some of Jess Phillips's tweets on X, post on X. Piss off, mate. I didn't attack him once. I said that it was bollocks and that the U-turn was because they listened. You only just see what you want. The country is in a fucking crisis, you utter pointless parading peacocks. You ain't no Asian. Yeah. The I want to be leader of the Tory charade that's been going on today is just despicable, selfish, couldn't give a shit about the country, I'd expect. The country is in a fucking crisis, you utter pointless parading peacocks. You ain't no Asian. Sorry, you ain't no Aslan. As in, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. This is my idea of Mills and Boone's passion. Sounds like bliss. Looking forward to eating shit. I think it meant to say eating shit, processed cheese, fries later. Sound like a drunk. Please do fuck off. Answer the fucking question. Here you go, you complete prick. He said, fuck business. I guess fuck democracy is what he says now. Fuck you is how this ends. Please excuse my language. I am reading what a government minister is posting online. Apparently she tries not to swear on here. If you are trying to use abuse and rape to have a political pop and carry on some fake propaganda war, where in your head you're a revolutionary, please fuck off. Well done all fighting the stupid context argument. It is now not unacceptable to fuck me until my teeth fix. Thanks all. All this while our fucking useless government faffs about spouting jingoistic shit to feed their bases. Her pet name for the man she has been married to for 43 years is SFF, or stupid fat fucker. If it was just us lot around. No, not sure why she has always seemed a commendable woman with loads to offer. He, on the other hand, is a prick. Dude, I think it's safe to say when Kavanaugh can become a Supreme Court judge, Donald pussy-grabbing Trump is a president I can say fuck. Wow, hashtag bellend. Good to know that Christopher is a xenophobe as well as a sexist twat. Fuck this shit. Fuck off. I do all the time. So we agree. She shouldn't be a crybaby on social media. If in the news she wants to stab someone in the front, not the back. And this is a selection of what she has to say online. Couple of videos.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? So it's sort of the very premise of your question is that the things that he's saying are so ridiculous as to initially make me just go, what? But then you wake up with the realisation that that's millions of people that he has said that to. And you feel immediately like this is going to turn my world upside down and I have to try and limit for how long that is the case. But, you know, it's not... my immediate thought was like, it's sort of like, what a joke. And then the realisation of what this is probably going to mean for you starts to set in.
Has it turned your world upside down?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a lot, actually. It's not great. And the thing that annoys me the most about it is that it takes up so much bandwidth of my time from a man who knows absolutely nothing about the subject he's talking about, when the only thing I ever want to be doing is being able to use all of my brain power to focus on the hundreds of girls I have supported over the years who have been victims of grooming gangs and what needs to happen to make their lives better and to stop what is still happening today.
And you think he knows nothing about that?
Oh, I mean, I don't know what Elon Musk knows about it, but I don't know if it's happening on Mars.
She wants to help the hundreds of girls that she's been helping around this. I've gone and looked and I cannot find any reference to Jess Phillips speaking out against Pakistani heritage rape gangs. If you can, please do send it me so I can have a look at it. And it's turned her world upside down. And she's trying to shift the responsibility of what's turned her world upside down. And I'll put the picture back up next to me so you can see it. This is all orchestrated. This is all staged. This is a tactic of the Labour Party to try and portray women as victims of misogyny when their policy decisions are attacked. And the policy decision that's been attacked here, not just by Elon Musk, but by millions of people in the United Kingdom, we are all outraged that she has refused a public inquiry into the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children, of Oldham's children. And she's trying to portray herself as the victim. This is orchestrated. This will be on the news channels all throughout the night, all tomorrow, and the lobbyists online will be pushing this and pushing this and pushing this. I urge as many of you who are on social media who see this to simply share my post underneath that. She had a man on Twitter say some little nasty things about her. No. Forget what they've done to me. I couldn't care. What about the tens of thousands of girls in this country who are victims of industrial scale gang rape? Do they not deserve justice? Well, listen to what she has to say on that, and I'll rip it to pieces.
enough, my instinct would all, you're absolutely right, your initial instinct would absolutely be like, yes, of course. And that was my instinct before Telford. And I campaigned with the victims in Telford, who I had supported before any inquiry had been done into them, was to ask for a national inquiry in Telford. And then I saw, because I was involved in it, I wonder how much Chris Philp or Kemi Badenoch have been involved or even read the documents that came out of Telford, or in fact any of the inquiries that have already happened. I watched what happened there and I saw a process that was the only one that has ever done anything to actually change the way the council, the local police, the local CPS have actually changed. And I took part in that process for years. And so actually, no, when I was asked to make that decision, my instinct was to try and get for Oldham what I'd seen in Telford.
Which was locally led.
Locally led, independent inquiry.
But the victims there felt that the Home Office would give them more oomph, give them more power.
The victims...
In Oldham. It was their voices that led to the council asking for this.
Well, I haven't spoken to them. I'm very much hoping to do that and arranging that. But I can understand the Telford victims wanted that, and I campaigned with them before they had that process. And the difference I saw in Telford compared with what I've seen from the National Inquiry into child sexual abuse is things changed. And actually, way quicker. And so having a Home Office-led inquiry into Oldham, that is not what I have seen work. I have seen work the alternative. And so I will base my decisions on evidence, not on very rich men in America.
I'm going to try not to swear at her or use any of her language in case she cries. She based her decision, admits she based her decision without speaking to anyone in Oldham. She admits that. She also admits that she made her decision because she's seen the Telford inquiry, the judge-led Telford inquiry, work in Telford, even though the survivors in Telford had asked for a public inquiry. The judge in Telford, in his report, clearly articulates his frustrations at not having the powers of a public inquiry. And he could only go so far. I've read the report, Jess Phillips. So you're making allegations of people who've not read the report. I've read the report, and the people who followed me here will know I spent hours going through the pages of that report and pulling out some of the key concerns. So first of all, she's not spoken to anyone in Oldham. Secondly, she promotes the Telford local inquiry, even though the judge who conducted that inquiry confirms the limitations of his scope of investigating because he didn't have the statutory powers. Third, she says she's a champion of the Telford style inquiry because she's seen it work, but omits the truth that there's never been a public inquiry done into the grooming gangs. So if there's never been a public inquiry done into the grooming gangs, how can you say a public inquiry into the grooming gangs doesn't work? Particularly when for 6 years we've campaigned for a public inquiry into the grooming gangs. And we've already had a local inquiry that's been exposed as a cover-up. I think it's Victoria Derbyshire who's interviewing her, who's absolutely vermin. One of those metropolitan elite vermin. I don't think Victoria, if she's got a daughter, would behave or interview this way if it had happened to her daughter or to someone in the community or the place she calls home. So we've ripped that apart so far. She then talks about how the Telford-style inquiry works and how she defines it works. And it's her own, there's no ambiguity here. She makes reference to it several times. Her definition of a successful inquiry is to change the practice of the organisations that failed so they don't do it again. That's her definition of a successful inquiry. Sorry, I'm going to swear. Well, get fucked. My definition of a successful inquiry has more strands to that. My definition of a successful inquiry is to look at the actual community who are responsible for these heinous crimes and identify what can be done to change the belief systems and attitudes within that community. My interpretation of a successful inquiry is to identify every one of those who were involved in grooming, gang raping, and then paying to rape these children and have them arrested, charged, and imprisoned. And if that means tens of thousands of Pakistani men go to prison, then so fucking be it. My definition of a successful inquiry is to not just to change the practice in those organisations that failed, but hold to account those who willingly, knowingly looked the other way, where children were gang raped. And remember, in Oldham, we have evidence of social workers, care home workers watching as children were taken out of care homes. Councillor Hughie MacDonald testified that. He witnessed it himself. My definition of a successful investigation is every politician who then covered it up and then harassed, intimidated, attempted to criminalise those of us who came forward. They are charged with misconduct in public office and imprisoned for their actions. My definition of a successful inquiry is to address some of the underlying issues of how these Pakistani gangsters now control these towns through controlling postal votes and have electoral reform in these towns and cities to help clean up these places. Am I being unreasonable? Tell me if I'm being unreasonable. And this is the problem I have with Farage, Badenoch, Jenkins, all of the others. They've not taken the time to understand the nuances of what is going on. They are all playing politics with this. I don't come to this space from a political space. I come to this space from one of where I give a shit about children. I've spent my life safeguarding children. I've spent my life safeguarding communities and protecting them from extremists. The people of my town who are here will testify that if it was not for me and the work that I've led on, there would be riots on the street as to what has gone on in my town. But I took them on a journey where I said, no, we are better than that. We will get to where we need to through political engagement, and we will take out political leaders and we will force an inquiry that way at the ballot box, through the ballot box. And it seems to me now that this campaign of ours, successful campaign of ours in Oldham, now needs to be expanded across the towns and cities where people care about safeguarding their children from these rape gangs. So I urge, once again, Badenoch and those in the Conservative Party, and they know exactly who I am. Yes, I dress like this here, and I'm in my corner of my living room. But they know exactly who I am. I don't need to wear a suit to prove my competency. Some of you might have seen Kinnock Jr. on Newsnight yesterday. He had a very nice suit on. Didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I've already offered for free my services to Reform. They've not been back in touch. If you want to understand this properly and deal with this properly, then you need to speak to me. You need to come and speak to the people of my town. If you want to grandstand on this, then when you lose the vote tomorrow, and this is what will happen, they will lose the vote tomorrow. They'll rant and rave, rant and rage even. And over a period of time, this will become yesterday's news and it will go on to the next issue. And we in Oldham know all about that. And if I have respect in this town, it is because I have been consistent. Relentless, consistent. And I now need to raise my game so I become not just a voice for my town. The people of my town need to support me and support everyone else in all the other towns and cities where this is going on. And so we can rip apart what these people are doing the way I've been ripping apart the messages they've been sending out for the last 5 years or so. Indeed, Evan. Evan is one of my older supporters. Diligently supports me, has been from the beginning. So, that is where we are at. You now know what's at play here. You all now know how to counter what's at play here. The vote will be lost tomorrow, but I'll come back tomorrow and go through some of the key discussion points with you. And I will share with you, we'll listen to what Jenkins, Farage, all the others, Badenoch have got to say. And I will share with you what I have to say and where I think we need to go. Please, if you find value in this work, at the very least, subscribe to the channel. You can subscribe for free. I can see some of you join as members. You should join for the 99 pence. It was we sometimes run workshops and do things on controversial issues. And if you're a member, it means you can just comment. I don't put anyone else's comments on because the council tried to sue me. Failed, of course, but they tried to sue me because someone said something not nice in the chat. Please like, please subscribe. Please remember, I am 100% community funded. This is my area of expertise. And when they lose the vote tomorrow, watch what I do next. A very, very good evening.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.